Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Brass Junkies. I am your host, Andrew Hitz, and I have a very sad announcement to make, actually. I regret to inform everyone that my co-host, Lance LaDuke, has decided to no longer continue as a host of the Brass Junkies. I would say that he will be missed, but let's be honest, he probably won't be missed very much. No, I'm just kidding. He's just not here. I am recording this intro, actually, from the third floor of trumpet player extraordinaire Jack Burt's house up in Bangor, Maine. He teaches at the University of Maine, and today is Lance's birthday, and for some strange reason, Lance wasn't in the mood to cancel his birthday plans in order to record this intro for all of you, because he's much more interested in his family and his own self-interest than he is in the audience. So may the record show that. So anyways, today's conversation that you are going to hear, we spoke with Dennis AsKew, who is an incredible tuba player and also is now an academic muckety-muck at UNC Greensboro. That is his official title, actually. Dennis is a dear friend of both of ours, and it's a great interview. We kind of take a deep dive on the education side of things, and I found it it bordered on titillating, actually. That's how good the conversation was. So, a couple of quick things to ask of you. If you could go to iTunes, there is a link in the show notes to iTunes. If you could leave us a rating, that would be awesome, and you can do that in under 30 seconds. If you want to leave us a quick review, that might take you another minute. That would be really incredible. A whole bunch of you have already done that. Thank you very much for that. And if you really want to help the show, then you can go to patreon.com/thebrassjunkies, and you can become a patron of the show for as little as $1 an episode, which is $2 a month. You can help us to cover the ongoing costs of the podcast, and a number of you have already done that. I think that we are at, as of now, we are at $38 an episode, which is really great. And if we can get to 50, then Lance and I are both going to pose with for photographs with trumpets, and we will choose some very trumpet-like poses for those photos. So if we can get to $50 an episode, there will be some wonderful photos of us holding trumpets with some great expressions on our faces that we will give as a thank you gift to the world. So we're just $12 short of that, and we really appreciate it to everyone who has already gone to Patreon and helped to show your support for the show. So. And also, I wanted to thank Parker Mouthpieces for covering our hosting. Parker Mouthpieces makes fine component mouthpieces that are available for tuba, euphonium, horn, and trombone. Horn, not horn. Horn is in the process of being developed right now with a very exciting guest artist who I am not allowed to reveal, but it's a real famous horn player. So that is in the pipeline. But as you can tell, I was supposed to have that blurb in front of me to read, and instead so that's why I just said that they make bassoon reeds and that they also make viola strings. So if you need bassoon reeds or viola strings, you should go to parkermouthpieces.com, and you can also follow them on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So without further ado, and happy birthday, Lance. You're old. He's actually a year short of being officially old. He's 49. So anyways, happy birthday, Lance, and we hope that you enjoy this conversation with Dennis AsKew. And today we are joined by a very special guest. He is known as a tuba player, as a father, as a deep thinker, as an academic,
Journeyman.
As a journeyman.
I like their songs.
He is Dr. Dennis AsKew.
Hi guys.
I always then say, "How are you, Dennis?" And I decided to not do that because I knew exactly what was going to happen, which was just an awkward silence, which was what I was going for. So that was perfect. So I think that about does it, Lance. Is there anything I'm forgetting?
Nope.
All right.
Funny ends.
Thanks for waking up at 8 a.m. for us, Dennis. All right. So who are you and why should people care?
I have no clue as to why people should care, but I'm been teaching tuba and playing tuba at UNC Greensboro for far too long, it feels like. As I said, I don't know why they should care about who I am, but I've just been teaching for a while. And now moving into the administrative side of things.
Lance, let's keep the awkward streak going. Ask an awkward question.
If you were a vegetable, what sort of vegetable would you be?
Probably something bulbous.
Nice.
Nice. Okay.
It's gonna be the record for the weirdest opening.
It's definitely.
Bulbous. Let me write bulbous down so I make sure I get it in the notes.
Lance, we're gonna have to remember how weird this was so that we can we record the intros afterwards now, and so we can make sure that the intro is equally as weird.
I'm glad I could help out with the whole.
Oh, it's not you.
Of the show.
It's us. Sadly, Apple doesn't give any statistics as to when people stop listening. You just get it's binary. It's just a download. So yeah, this one might make it about 6 minutes. So,
well, I figured that in the whole thing, looking at all the podcasts and stuff, and there's sort of a spectrum of bars on how many times that these podcasts have been downloaded. I figure I'm going to wind up with a half a bar.
Half of a bar. They're going to have to institute the half bar
Tuba
system.
Players ever had a half a bar. Thank you. All right. So, Dennis, how long have you been at the University of North Carolina in Greensboro?
I've been here for 24 years. Just finished the 24th year.
And
that's longer than I think either of you. No, at least Andrew's been alive. So.
Yeah, that's right. I'm 19.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah. Okay. So did you have a gig before that, or this was your first gig and you've been there forever?
This was my first full-time college gig. I had actually, along the way, served as the assistant band director at Bucknell University in Central.
Watch your mouth. Hey, this is a family show.
Understood. Bucknell.
Oh.
Bucknell.
How long were you at Bucknell?
For a total of 2 years. I was the assistant director of bands and low brass guy and so forth while I was working on my master's at Penn State.
Gotcha. Where'd you do your undergrad?
University of Georgia. Dogs.
Can you imagine anyone who's aspiring to be a college band director is hearing that you were the assistant director of bands as you were getting your master's, and they're screaming at their iPod,
their devices,
at their devices,
their listening devices.
Yeah, I had an undergraduate degree, and that was it, and was hired to be their assistant director of bands.
Where did you do your undergrad?
Georgia.
You just said that.
I did.
I was thinking.
I always give you crap about that Georgia-Florida weekend thing.
Yes, yeah. I was born and raised a Florida fan. My dad was the class of '64, and so yeah, I'm. The good news is that you guys aren't Florida State, so I think that's the nicest thing I can say about you. So,
Dennis, where'd you get your bachelor's degree? Where did you finish your doctorate? Let's close out just to kind of rub Andrew and my nose in the fact that you have way more degrees than we do. Actually, you have more than we do combined, but
that is a true statement.
University of Michigan.
Oh, so we both have reasons to just...
and Lance is a Michigan State guy.
That whole state thing, yeah.
Well, we need a better vetting process, Lance.
When were you at U of M?
I started my doctorate in '89.
Gotcha. So we were in the state at the same time. I was finishing up my undergrad at Michigan State. So you were after Torchinsky or right at the end of his?
I was Fritz's first doctoral student.
I'll be darned.
Yeah, I was actually going to go to Illinois to study with Fritz. That's what I wanted. It was all because of him. And then I was I already had the assistantship papers and everything in place at at Illinois. And he called me on, I don't know, a Saturday morning. And I was convinced when I answered the phone, because there was no caller ID in those days or anything like that. So you couldn't avoid the call. So he called, and I thought he was going to yell at me because I hadn't turned in the papers yet, and I'd gotten them on Wednesday, and this was Saturday, and I was like, I'm sorry, I haven't turned them in. I was really nervous. Sorry, that was my ding.
And in the next corner, weighing in at 412 pounds, Lulu Rabinowitz.
Yeah, exactly. He was a classmate of mine at Penn State. But Fritz was calling to say, in fact, that he had gotten the job at Michigan, and was I interested in going with him? And I was just audacious enough to say, well, sure, if you get me the same kind of financial deal that you did at Illinois.
Yeah, buddy.
Nice.
And he actually got me a better deal at Michigan. And
there you go.
Hey, I can one up your late paperwork story. I got a call in I guess it was January or February of my senior year at Northwestern from Sam Palafian, who said, "Hey, do you want to?" We had talked for years about how I would go to grad school with him, and he said, "Do you want to be the TA? School will be free, and you'll get paid." And so I was like, "That's awesome." And he said, "Great, so it's done." And I had some kind of follow through issues at that point in my life, and so I don't at all ever anymore, right, Lance?
No. Uh-uh.
And so I got a phone call from Sam like the first week of July. And he said, Hitz? And I said, yeah. And he said, keep in mind, he's known me at this point already like 8 years. And he was like, did you ever apply to Arizona State? And I was like, yeah, come to think of it, I didn't. and he just said, what the hell? And I was like, would that have been helpful? And he said, yeah, that would have been helpful. And so, it turned out, since I was following fish around the country, starting the next week, that I was driving from Chicago all the way to Phoenix to see them, and I was going to be passing through. So he was like, "So do you think that you might be able to just find 10 minutes to be able to come in and sign some paperwork when you're in town?" I said, I could pencil that in. And he said, "Thanks, Hitz." And he was laughing. He was trying not to, but he was laughing. So, so you had nothing to worry about, man. Nothing to worry about at all. See, you're an assistant director of bands with an undergrad, and now there's people hearing that I was Sam's TA without having even applied for school. And Lance, why don't you piss everybody off?
Well, I
just be yourself.
Oh yeah. Done. I was trying to think the dumbest thing that, in retrospect, it's hard to rank that, but the one of the dumber things I did is when I was taking the Air Force band audition. It was down to 2 guys. It was me and Don Nauman, who was in the ceremonial band at the time. They interviewed both of us, and the panel they said, well, if we give the position to Don, there'll be an opening in the ceremonial band. Would you like it? I said, no.
Yeah, buddy.
They said, they had this sort of shocked look, and they said, well, why? And I said, meanwhile, I'm thinking about, Bob Daniel was sitting up there. Brian Bowman is sitting up there. Ron Blaze. It's like a crazy panel, right? And I said, well, it just strikes me that job isn't all that musical. And they cracked up, fortunately. Unfortunately, I got the gig. But in retrospect, I should have taken that gig. In some ways, I should have taken that gig anyway. I should have, let Don have it. But that's a different story. So, yeah, I don't know how that flew out of my face, but it did.
That was the very first kernel of insubordination with Lance's military career. There you go, which ended up popping to be a full bucket of popcorn.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, good stuff.
So, Dennis, at what point along the way in the 24 years in your tenure at Greensboro did you decide that because you've had a lot of leadership roles and administrative roles in TUBA, ITEA, and then at UNCG additionally, correct? I mean,
Correct.
You started picking up that sort of thing. So what causes a person, was it head trauma? Like what caused you to want to do all of that sort of stuff?
Well, to be perfectly honest, I think there probably was a little bit of head trauma. Part of it was just because for whatever reason, over the years, starting like with high school band and stuff, I would just sort of step up and take over. I don't know. I don't know if it was a death wish at that point or what, but I just sort of did those things. You hear the dogs?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey man, Andrew Ballio's interview. He was at the Sheep and Wool Festival outside of Baltimore, where he was helping his wife out, and he was awesome to fit us in. But there were loud sheep noises throughout. So, yeah, your dogs are nothing.
Just beating them back over here.
Yep.
But early on, at my time here, I had the job. I don't know, probably not even a year, and my mother-in-law, who has since passed away, was a very strong-willed woman, and she said to me at, I don't know, Christmas or sometime, she goes, "All right, when are you going to be dean?" and I'd been in the job for like a year, not even. And so part of it, I think, was me going, okay, how am I going to shut her up? Oh, wait, I shouldn't say that loud. But it was truly just...
Bless her heart.
Okay, yeah, bless her heart. But it furthered that thought process for me. I mean, because she was never one to be sort of okay with where somebody was. What's the next step? How are you going to do that? And push me along with her 3 children and then their wives and so forth. Like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? And so along the way, I did do some, I was director of undergraduate studies and assistant dean here for a couple of years, and then stepped away from that. And because everything started ramping up with ITEA, and it was all around the time that I was set to host the international conference in 2002. And
which is when Lance and I met.
Oh.
You're responsible for all of this crap, Dennis.
That's on you.
All of it.
All of it's on me. Okay, great. Fantastic. Fantastic. But, and then it just sort of stayed along. I mean, I wound up sometime in the late part of the last decade, I don't know, probably 07, 06, 07, 08, somewhere in there. I actually applied for and then got to the interview round of an assistant dean job at Florida State. And then it wasn't the time for me yet. And the reason I figured out it wasn't the time for me yet to really go like full headstrong into the administration thing was I was in Tallahassee in my hotel room, got up that morning and went, this is the first time I've ever been on something like this. I didn't have a horn with me. And it felt really awkward not having the horn with me. This time, because it was sort of just from within the ranks and going up, I didn't have that kind of experience, but it just, I've talked to my wife a lot over the past few years, and it just seems like, all right, it's time to move really further deep into the administrative side of things.
What was the process like in terms of I don't know if you're going to stop playing or you're obviously going to be playing less, but was that I mean, you kind of hinted at it. Was that a big struggle? Was it a long thought process? I mean, I've thought about it. You get to a point and you go, well, I mean, I've been very, very fortunate in my career, and I go, well, what else? I mean, what now?
For those to interrupt very quickly, for anyone who does not know, is not familiar with Dennis's tuba playing, he's a monster player, like monster. So anyway, I hate saying nice things about bulldogs.
And he's got a big jaw on the back of his elbow.
Yes, absolutely. So
thank you.
Yeah, Andrew. Of course.
Well, just several different things happened along the way. Mercifully, I never had any sort of significant injuries or anything like yens or anything like that where it became really problematic. So I didn't have that to deal with, but it became just a little more prevalent that, okay, I've got to really concentrate for the next 6 weeks to get this recital together, or I've got to really pull things together for this, or whatever it was. And it wasn't just sort of automatically there. I think to some degree it started not a downturn, but just having less in front of me as our faculty quintet. It was called the Market Street Brass. About 4 years ago, we had someone retire, and it started just sort of not taking a downturn. It's just we decided that we weren't going to continue in the same fashion. And in those days, probably from 2000 to maybe 2012 or so, 11 or 12, we were, as a faculty quintet, doing 60 plus services a year, which was pretty active for a faculty brass quintet.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Overseas as well, right? Did you go?
Yeah. Went to China twice and so forth. So we did a lot. And so as that sort of took a turn because of a retirement, it just became more and more difficult. My mind started turning more and more to, okay, what's the next thing? So it was a long process because I will be playing less. I'm still going to play in the North Carolina Brass Band. I've made the commitment to that for the next year, and we'll see. Make sure I don't become a detriment to the organization with my playing.
It's just the tuba part, man. It's
just the tuba
probably
part.
Not going to be a problem.
But other than that, I think my solo days are behind me doing stuff like that, just because I think it's going to be too hard to maintain.
And does that bother you? I mean, where are you emotionally about all that?
I came to my peace with it. It's in the same way that I came to peace over a year ago about the studio teaching. In many ways, the studio teaching has meant more to me than the playing has. The playing is sort of what I've done, what I started out in high school doing and so forth. It's always been there, but it's always more personal. For me, leaving the teaching part was the thing I had to really come to grips with. And a year and a half ago, after our School of Music had the site visit from NASM and so forth, and I was a department chair at the time of the Department of Music Performance, the site team said to me and to the dean, unless you want him to implode soon, something needs to change. And so the dean was able to work it out to get a half-time position to take over half the studio. So I had to come to peace with giving up half the studio, but then I was still saying to myself, well, I could go back to full-time studio teaching, or I could go into administration. And then after I made that, it was like, okay, I can do this. And so, I mean, I could still go back at some point, I'm sure, to the studio teaching and work to get the chops back up and things like that as needed, but I'm not sure that that's going to happen. I think I'm sort of too far down the dark side, as it were.
But you're not. It doesn't sound like you're really driven to do that. You're driven in another direction, and you're just sort of following. Instinct.
Yeah.
So what? Let's back up. So you don't just accidentally become the head of a school of music or a department or an area. So what skills did you pick up along the way, or what were the pieces of the puzzle that you were able to assemble that made this a thing that is happening now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think some of the things, as you alluded to earlier, with ITEA, TBA, just the different positions that I had there allowed me to develop some organizational things in terms of and getting a reputation for, let's give it to Dennis and he'll do it, and then I would get the job done. And it was just sort of a work ethic that whatever was handed to me, I would figure out how to make it happen. And as time went on, then it just sort of seemed that I kept being not handed things, but the concept of being an area chair, then department head, and now director of the school were because I just did the job and whatever was handed to me. And so the skill sets, it was always just about being organized. I won't say that I was organized as a high school kid or even a college kid. Some of the time our GPAs reflect that. But
did you apply to college each time?
I did, in fact, apply to college each time.
So I guess you were pretty together.
But, I think, too, my dad was a United Methodist minister. And so I saw him on a week-in, week-out basis have to get up and effectively perform. But he had to work at it. He had to prepare the sermons. He had to go out and, visit the folks and do the things. And we were always in small-town churches. And I think that was just a role model that why wouldn't I do it that way? Why wouldn't I get the job done? Why wouldn't I practice? Why wouldn't I to make sure that was done? And just all that together.
Do you feel like the mindset for, let's say, getting ready for a recital?
Yeah.
Are there parallels between that and getting ready for a faculty meeting, or getting ready for? I know there's probably a lot more drinking involved when you're getting ready for a faculty meeting, but
yeah, there is. There are parallels that go on, and it just has to do with mapping out what needs to take place. I mean, it in many ways it's almost more like and I have always found this to be true. I have a music ed undergrad and was actually a high school band director too along the way, if only for a year. But that the concept of practicing for a recital is just like laying out lesson plans for what you're going to do with the band or the ensemble, whatever it is, which is the same thing of laying out the lesson plan or the agenda for the faculty meeting, and what do we need to talk about, and what actually needs to go into an email that we don't have to talk about and waste everybody's time in person.
Amen.
Versus what goes into, okay, we really need to have open discussion on this.
How big of a faculty?
70 full-time and adjunct, 56 full-time.
And you, Dennis and I got to hang out together in South Carolina at the College Music Society thing, and so I know some of this, but can you explain the structural changes that are coming about at UNCG, which are going to make your job even more interesting?
Yeah, sure. For a little bit of background, UNCG was the Women's College of North Carolina until the early 60s and went co-ed. In that time frame, starting in the 20s, I guess, late 20s, it was a school of music, and music has been a discipline for UNCG in its almost 30-year existence. So music was there, and we were a school of music, freestanding school of music in the university outline. And there's about 19,000 students here now. So we have about 600 majors and have had between 550 and 600 for probably at least a decade. So this freestanding school of music became, as many of us refer to it, via a shotgun wedding. We're married to theater and dance and became a school of music, theater, and dance. And that was about 7 years ago. At that point, music was divided into three departments inside this school. There was a department of theater, a department of dance, and then a department of music performance, department of music education, and department of music studies, so theory, ethnomusicology, musicology, and so forth. What's happening now is we've just reorganized again, and we will, pending final approval at the end of July, but it's all in place. We will be a College of Visual and Performing Arts and adding the Department of Art into it. And one of the structural changes that's happening is everybody is being renamed to a school. So that we'll have a School of Music, School of Art, School of Theater, School of Dance. Within music, we're taking down the walls of those three departments and making 10 areas. So very similar, Lance, to what was at Michigan State. And recently, they formed a College of Music. They shifted to that College of Music, but kept those 10 or 11 departments, or those areas, and they all became departments. Everything just sort of moved up in nomenclature, as it were. So similar kind of thing for us. So what I'm having to do is organize everything into these 10 areas, and with a whole lot of faculty input. We had a week of meetings back in May, just sort of setting up the new instrument of governance and how the committee structure is going to be and how P&T is going to work and all these kinds of things. So it's a lot of administrative blah, 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 blah.
Well, I was going to ask you, is that stuff interesting to you?
It's interesting in a different kind of way. I mean, when it works, it gives a very good sense of accomplishment. It's a different kind of thing. People have asked, well, do you enjoy administration? Well, I don't know that administration is something to be enjoyed, to be perfectly honest. However, I can gain satisfaction out of getting the job done. Mm-hmm. And that's just a similar kind of thing, that we can gain those satisfactions.
So you're dealing, you're coming, how far are you through that change over to this new structure? On
August 1, it will be all in place to go boom, and we'll start the year with it.
this has been, and now you're about to launch into a period of significant change. And so how do you lead a group of 70 faculty, as well as your colleagues in the other schools? How do you lead through that change? And I want to follow up with what you deal with, how you deal with the conflict, but how do you manage the change? Like, this is happening, and how do we get through this?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that over the years, I've developed enough trust that people will give me a benefit of the doubt, and so just by doing the job and being effective in the things that I have done, there is enough trust to go, okay, let's see how it goes. And so then it's my job just to make sure that all the things that we're talking about with changes and committee structure and P&T and so forth do come to fruition. Or if it changes somehow midstream, which it very well can, is that I'm able to guide it in such a way that helps to ensure the success. Taking people's suggestions, other faculty suggestions on, well, I don't know that we want it to be that way. Can we try this? And so then I put them on a subcommittee and make them come up with the answers. And then we put that into place, and we have, just informal votes to let's do this or do that. But what it really boils down to is me making sure that I'm able to follow through in such a way on literally everything that people will trust me enough to make sure that it happens.
And what do you do about conflict? I mean, maybe it's different there, but from what I understand, at some institutions, not everybody agrees all the time.
Oh. Our faculty are perfect and never have disagreements. Sure. I feel sorry for you. No. Actually, I do have an incredible faculty to work with, and I'm not trying to say that to gain their trust.
But
it's how do we?
I'm not trying to get you to out people, but there's just people have different ideas about how to move down the road, so it's going to bring conflict.
Well, part of it, to be really honest, that I've learned over the past 3 years, and 3 years ago when I became department head for music performance, I made my share of blunders. That's for sure. And one of the most important things I've learned is as much as possible, just like I said earlier about faculty meetings, if it can be handled in an email just for information giving, I'll do it in an email. But when I'm talking with someone, if I'm communicating with someone, if it's sensitive enough, then we don't do it via email. We have a discussion, and as much as possible, I go to them. I don't say, come to my office. It's not, that's not how it should be done. It's when you have time. Well, can I swing by your place at that point? Mm-hmm. And it's that kind of communication so that, everybody understands not everybody's going to get everything that they want. I think that they really do understand that in our faculty. However, what I'm trying to set up is an openness about having, the way that having places and times for them to be able to talk without necessarily me even being involved. I mean, one of the things that I've insisted on as we are setting on this new government is that there will be an elected chair of the faculty that will be an at-large person, that's someone that's not on the leadership team. They aren't an area chair. They're not an assistant director or anything like that. But that there will be an elected person. We're already making the schedule for the monthly faculty meetings. I'm going to be in charge of 3 of those, beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year. And then the chair of the faculty will be in charge of the rest. And I won't be there unless I'm specifically requested to do so. That says that I trust them to be able to have the conversations. I'm not going to micromanage over what they're doing and so forth. And if it's decided that, they really don't like what I'm doing and they want to, issue a vote of no confidence, they have a mechanism by which to do that. And not everywhere has that kind of thing. Not everywhere has a system set in place that the faculty can self-govern in that manner. There are some things administratively I just have to have meetings for. Other things, they're on their own.
That's great. That's great leadership. Yeah, that's really great leadership. It's so important to trust. Nothing demoralizes any group of human beings faster than delegating authority to them and then doing it yourself or standing over their shoulder the entire time, or just, getting the work done and then correcting it afterwards every single time. So
right. And I really don't want to be that leader. I don't want to be that person.
Right.
That's just not who I am. So
the equivalent to that is sending out an email to everyone, and then at the beginning of the next faculty meeting, reading the email aloud to everyone as well.
Right. I mean, it's in the same way that we teach with PowerPoints, and we read every bullet point of the presentation. It's like, no, that's that. We all hate that.
Yep.
And so why should what we do? The committees that we set up will have time at every faculty meeting to bring forward stuff to the faculty. I mean, that's, it's for them, by them kind of thing. I'm helping to set up the structure.
You're talking about having conversations with people, whenever it's anything sensitive. And that's actually something that I learned from, certainly from a business standpoint, from our psychopath friend, Patrick Sheridan, is that, his rule, is that if any communication that he's about to have with someone is even 1% weird, like he can't even put his finger on it, but it's just not something that's just completely standard, that he picks up the phone. And now, obviously, when you're working in a school of music, you have the ability to go and be face to face, which is much better. But if I'm working with someone in Chicago, it's not like I'm flying there. But you pick up the telephone and do it old school, and there's no tone to emails. There's no tone to text messages. There's no tone to Facebook, messages, etc. But the voice is kind of the way to go. So that's also good leadership.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And nowadays with what we have with Skype and or FaceTime or whatever, I think that's actually preferable to the phone call. If at all possible, because I can see what's going on with the person that I'm talking with,
right?
And sometimes people want to hide behind no video, but I think that it's, the video thing, not having technical difficulties with standing or anything like that. I think it's almost as requisite as being face to face if you really want to get something done.
What is your vision moving? Do you have a 5-year contract in this position, or is it open ended, or how's that work?
Interestingly enough, right now, because of the structural change, I was on a 4-year department head contract. And so my first year as director will be a 1-year contract. And so they could oust me in the spring if they wanted to. And hopefully I'll do things well enough that they want me to be ousted. But then after that, it'll be a 4-year contract. Is the way things
so well, we just came from the College Music Society event that our other crazy friend Dave Cutler put together, and I thought it was I've never been to one of those, but I was really impressed with the whole thing, and I thought it was a very interesting process and conversation about where do we go as schools of music to serve the needs of these students. And so what you're in a leadership role. I mean, you are the man there. So where are you going? Where do you see things going? What are your hopes, dreams, goals for UNCG?
Well, I think that I agree. I think that the thing at South Carolina, the CMS thing was well run. I think there were a lot of great things that came out of spurred a lot of good conversation. I was fortunate in that I was able to bring a total of 8 faculty down to that. So we had a good number. So we're coming back with people who've experienced all that, probably more so than any other school. But I think the idea is mainly to have more conversation, coming out of that. One of the things that struck me, and I'm probably going to raise a little ire along the way by saying this, but it struck me in reading that CMS manifesto, what's referred to as the manifesto that came out a couple of years ago, basically written by Ed Sarath from University of Michigan, but he had a pool of other folks. And this was a little bit in the place also at the CMS thing, which is there's a bit of an attack of the large ensemble that's happening right now. And for many schools, that winds up being the thing for schools of music, the large ensemble process, be it band, orchestra, choirs, even jazz ensemble that we can refer to as large ensemble for a big band, those are the things that get people in the door to see the other things that we want to prepare our students to do. For the general average person in Greensboro, North Carolina, coming to see Eighth Blackbird or what was the name of that trio? The Fourth Wall.
Fourth Wall Ensemble, yeah.
Things like that. They aren't necessarily going to come see them. They'll come see the wind ensemble or the orchestra, and it needs to be really good. And then they'll look in the program and see these other things like Eighth Blackbird and Fourth Wall Ensemble and so forth that are coming, and they might come see them as that draw-in. Mm-hmm. I think that there's a lot of skills that we need to make sure are maintained in learning from the large ensemble that we can then transfer to the smaller ensemble, the chamber kind of thing. I will not disagree, however, in any way, shape, or form. Some of the most important musicianship, sensitive musicianship that can be learned is in a chamber ensemble setting. I mean, we have, regardless of what the ensemble is, be it brass quintet, be it tuba euphonium quartet, be it tuba, soprano, and bass drum, I don't care, whatever that is, that's where a lot of the growth happens. And I think that it's making sure that we're training our musicians to be the best musicians they can be. So it's not one or the other, it's sort of both, and we got to train for both. Your second interview with JD, he got into that conversation as well of it's really about making sure that whatever the student, in terms of musical terms, wants to do, we're preparing them musically to be able to do that. The conversation, the greater conversation, in my opinion, is about the general classroom proficiencies that we expect. I think to some degree, again, I'm going to raise some ire with some folks, the old school conservatory, in quotation marks, kind of training with theory and ear training and music history is probably a little bit outdated or a lot outdated, and that's where we have to have the real conversations is about what goes on there. I think if you were to go through, if you can name 75 school and departments of music across the United States and look at their degree programs, their upper level courses in performance and even the BA, certainly in music education, the upper level stuff is probably all in really pretty good shape. There's not a lot that necessarily has to be changed there. In my opinion, it's about what goes on in the first 2 years. The shared courses amongst whatever degree program it is, Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Performance, Music Education, Music Therapy, Music Business, whatever it is, those shared courses that they're all in together, that's where we have to identify the places that can better train them to be successful out in the real world. Having a single class, and we're guilty of this, having a single class for the music performance major of entrepreneurship in the arts doesn't do a whole lot for them, especially when it's visioned as the capstone course in that degree. So they come in and we talk to them about how to write resumes, how to write cover letters, how to perhaps interview for the job, what kind of jobs are available, that kind of stuff. We need to catch them in the freshman year.
Yeah, because none of that has to do with an entrepreneurial mindset. That's
correct.
Right. And we got to catch them. We should help them with that, but we need to be able to find ways throughout, throughout their degree program. I mean, so here's a parallel with this new committee structure that we just put in place to present to the faculty. I mean, it's not going to be the thing until the faculty have the chance to vote on it. But we're faced, as every university, as every person is virtually worldwide now, with this concept of diversity. We got to make sure that we're dealing with diversity and looking at things more than from a white male background, WASPy, to use the 1970s terminology, kind of background. And so instead of having a diversity committee with our committee set up, we ran the concept of diversity into every single committee so that they're in the charge of the committee, even the undergraduate curriculum committee, the graduate curriculum committee, that the concept, because diversity can be identified in a variety of ways, of course, but we wrote that concept through of diversity into every single committee charge that we're going to put in front of the faculty. I think in the same way, one of the things that should, and this is hard for old time, long in college teaching folks to deal with, but we need to write the concept of entrepreneurship and independence of thought and finding that way into every single class, beginning with the first theory class. We need, it's more than just saying, you'll thank me later for this because you need to know this. It's not that. It's finding a way in all of those classes to have it be there. A single class isn't going to do it. But if they have to do something, some of the presentations they had at the CMS thing, I don't know if you were in on one, the guy who was the music ed guy from Michigan State. He had done, he had done a class, and they basically had to do a project, and they had to like come up with all these different covers in a variety of different styles.
Right.
That kind of thing, and doing it from the ear training standpoint, and things written down, and doing all those kinds of things. And so you make them wind up having to come up with performance venues, or you just set up, this is when this recital is going to take place, and then they'll get their friends or whatever to show up. But it's the idea of, you got to put it on. You got to put these things out, and you're not going to have much time to do with it.
That's great. It's interesting moving forward that with Google at all of our fingertips 24 hours a day, having knowledge is not the commodity that it used to be, because anyone can instantly look up Ted Williams' batting average in 1946 if that's something that they need. And so you don't need to, having that memorized is no longer, it'll save somebody maybe like 18 seconds of pulling out their phone and looking it up. And so things along the lines of how to write a resume and cover letters, which are very important. If you're applying for a college teaching job and your cover letter sucks, and if your resume is not formatted even remotely correctly, then you're not even going to get considered. But that's the thing with Google, or with an online course or a YouTube video, you can hear from the experts in the world on those subjects, and you can learn that stuff in 20 minutes. And
or you can go to Fiverr and drop a Fiverr.
Yes,
and cover letter come out in half an hour.
Yeah, exactly. You can have someone write the cover letter. That's what Lance just mentioned. Fiverr, FIVERR.com is a website with people around the world offering small services for $5. So it's great that we have leaders in place that recognize, and again, writing a good cover letter or having a good cover letter written for you, having a good cover letter, period, is important, but that's probably not the best way, when that is taking the place of actually experiencing and making. I love that thing about different covers, and, it's like, go listen to different styles of music, go figure out how to speak those musical languages, set them yourselves, get set up the recital yourself, all of the above. Those are all usable skills that can help you live indoors and eat food. So that's an exciting direction for things to head in.
Yeah.
All that stuff none of it is a differentiator. It's
Correct.
The minimum required thing to get through the door. And then how do you differentiate yourself in a crowded marketplace?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
and
a cover letter, I don't care how well a cover letter is written, you can't just write that much better of a cover letter than 100 people, right? It's like 30 people's cover letters will get them disqualified, but that's not going to get any of the other 70 on the fast track to getting the gig, no matter what the heck it is.
Right. And so part of it is helping the students know something that I'd learned. I don't even know who. I know I'm not smart enough to have figured it out on my own. I know that, but I couldn't tell you who it was that told me this. But the bottom line is, keep your options open. The way that I was looking at everything, I did an undergrad, started off in music ed because I was going to be the best damn band director the state of Georgia ever seen. That's what I was going to do.
Where did you do your undergrad?
Yeah, exactly. So the thing was, I got into, and I'd had my successes in playing. I was all-state and stuff like that. But then I got into Georgia, and my teacher at the time, Dave Randolph, who passed away, 16, 17 years ago now, he really was a fantastic player, like a really unsung hero of the players of the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. And so I just dug playing. And so I switched very ill-advisedly to a performance major. And it was like, oh, what the hell am I going to do with that? And then flip back around to music ed and wound up getting both degrees. Took 5 years, but got both degrees. But then it became the option, quote unquote, music ed became my second option. So that was the whole thing. That's why I was interested and willing to be the assistant band director at Bucknell. That's why, while I was working on my doctorate at Michigan, I was working with Plymouth Canton marching band, who won the Bands of America thing back in 1990 and 91. And so, that was keeping my options open. And that's what helped me along the way. I mean, when I was hired here, it was tuba and euphonium and music education. I was a band director with the DMA in hand. So
that's not a fair fight right there. I bet you were with who you are and how you play, and with that paperwork and that experience, you were probably the guy from the word jump, and they just had to go through the process.
Well, and I was young and cheap. I mean, that was part of it too. I
Right.
was young and very cheap, and I wanted the job bad enough. I mean, I took a $5,000 pay cut from public school to come teach at the university, but I also had faith and confidence in the ability to do it because I wanted to do that job. I wanted to be the college tuba and euphonium guy, and so, but keeping the options open. I mean, I've got a person who is in the DMA program here right now who. Actually, one who just finished, whose music ed thing was his side thing. He was a band director for a while, and he'll probably wind up being able to be successful. And because of that, another one is developing her skills at doing things like music caprice and history of rock and history of jazz and all those kinds of things, and doing that scene. And now she's already picked up an adjunct job teaching trombone and euphonium. Along the way while she's doing her doctorate. So it's this sideline thing. She's doing one thing, but she has something else to be able to do. And that's what it's all about, is keeping those options open, regardless of what the options are. And sometimes the options are being a great orchestral player, but developing jazz chops.
Right.
If you're really going to be a performer. But it can also be any number of other things. A lot of guys are in the tech industry and play a ton, And so it's just, it's find that other thing that keeps your options going.
I actually quote you a lot on The Entrepreneurial Musician from a conversation that we had when we were driving to school when I was down visiting UNCG to talk with the entrepreneurship class and to work with your studio. And I remember the way that you put it that morning, which I loved, was what else do you do? And that was the point that Lance was just making a few minutes ago, where keep your options open. What else do you do? And getting curriculums aligned with, with that is fantastic. And the answer can be you can do anything else. I mean, you really can do. Lance has basically created a position for himself at Carnegie Mellon, which is like, if you were to open up his exact job description of what he's doing, then the list would be, not that you couldn't break it up and get it filled by a number of people with bleed for over other jobs. He's not that irreplaceable, but let's be clear. But exactly what he does is,
I wish I could argue with you.
Yeah, but that's the case with all of us and with any job, But I mean, what he does in terms of meeting with all the incoming freshmen and giving them permission to go and seek whatever route they want to in the music business, and also teaching and recruiting world-class euphonium talent. And I mean, it's just, there's very, very specific to him, and that's because it was kind of created around him and his skills. And I hate to say nice things about him, but he's not a fungible guy, So,
right.
Yeah.
I like mushrooms.
Oh, God. No? Stop it. It's too early for jokes that are that unfunny, especially when someone like you has the ability to be funny anytime you want, which means that was just malicious.
Was malicious.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel bad.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
so
good.
Dennis, here's one of the most common pushbacks about all of this business entrepreneurship stuff is that it's going to take away from my time to practice. And if I want to be the next concertmaster of blank or the next principal whatever of the whatever Philharmonic, I have to just lock myself in a practice room for 8 hours and get all of that done. And that sentiment is very strong. And it's both from students and faculty. There are a number of faculty members who firmly believe that there's just that you can't sacrifice an hour to go deal with this stuff. How do you?
Let's name names. Dennis, you start.
Remember, I only have a 1-year contract.
That's exactly why I said Dennis, you start. It would be that was the most awkward route to take.
So how do you talk to someone that has that mindset?
Well, I think the first thing is that it has to be talking with that person. It can't be someone bringing it up in a classroom situation, and you put everybody else at bay to have this conversation with them. But I think that there's some degree, all right, so you're going to go in and you want to practice 6 hours, 8 hours, whatever a day, and you're going to do that. How are you going to eat in the process? It's that whole starving waiter thing about how do you get on Broadway business, And so for that group of people. So you got to have something. And if you're willing to put yourself through the grindstone and like just be miserable because you're going to be the starving artist to do that, there's not much way that you can sway. But what I think is important as part of the conversation is not everybody is going to be that way. And so we have to provide for those, I don't want to get in that person's way, along the way. But I think that they need to realize that everybody's not them, plain and simply,
Right.
And that's what we want to encourage our students to do is, to live under a roof and eat food. I mean, we have to be able to do those things. And so if, there's only so much time that a violist or bassoonist is going to be able to live under mom and dad's roof, and keep doing that after school. Otherwise, you're just going to keep racking up debt and racking up debt and racking up debt if they keep going to college, and that's all that they're going to college for, is doing that. I'm not sure that they're doing themselves a favor. It can work out. It can happen. Here's a good example. Crap, I forgot the guy off the top of my head. I can't think of his name. He's a euphonium player in the Marine Band in the early 80s. And he's been in Rochester, lived in Rochester. Now he lives on a boat.
Falcone?
No.
Not Art Lehman either. It's, good golly.
Art Linkletter?
Art Linkletter, that's right.
Yeah.
Phony players do the darndest things.
So anyway, this guy, I mean, his whole plan was, I'm going to get into the Marine Band. I mean, he was going to make the Marine Band as a euphonium player. And so he took the lesson and so forth, but he got a job. I'm sorry. Yeah, Glenn Call. That's who it was. Glenn Call. So he got a job, I think, as a airplane technician or something, and would practice before and after work. He would get in there before 8 a.m. or before 7 a.m. and practice for a couple of hours in the hangar. So he had great resonance and all that kind of stuff. Did the 8-hour job and then stayed on and practiced more, And so he was getting in the amount of time to practice. I'm not sure, to be perfectly honest, I'm not sure anybody needs to put in more. Having been there myself and done it, I don't know that anybody needs to put in more than maybe 4 hours a day in practice. Mm-hmm. I think it becomes a point of diminishing return, to be perfectly honest. Sure. I know string players can fiddle longer and so forth, and brass players can do that. But I'm not sure that in terms of mental capabilities, are we really progressing?
That's right.
I just don't think that it. And then it becomes a problem with all the physical attributes and so forth, because you wind up wrecking your back, or you get a hump in your back if you're a pianist or whatever it is, and carpal tunnel and all these different things, where if you backed off a little bit and practiced smarter, followed this whole concept of practice training coach kind of thing, and doing laying out groundwork for what you're going to get done, and being more not mental, that's the wrong word, but being more studious about how you're setting up your practice time, you can get the same amount done in a smaller amount of time. And then if you're going to have a job, why not have a job in something that you actually enjoy, as opposed to having a job to support yourself while you're still practicing to get the big gig that you absolutely hate? That's a miserable existence.
I think the whole thing, and I set you up, this was kind of a softball, but I think the entire thing is a false argument. I think the assumption is that it's an either or. Right. I can either practice all day or I can work on this business stuff. but I can't do both, and that's, I just think, complete bupkis.
That's that only comes from someone who has never done both and is trying to justify that fact. Which, like, you're not a bad person if you've only done one or the other. I mean, no one's passing judgment, so you're kind of trying to defend yourself against straw man argument. I mean, but of course it's possible. And if you practice 10 hours a day, you don't have any time for any life experiences. If you're never crazy happy, crazy sad, heartbroken, I mean, then you're going to be a horrible musician anyway. You're going to play like a factory worker. So who the hell wants to hear you in the first place?
Well, it's not 1-to-1. You don't need 10 hours of practice and then 10 hours of working on the business.
Correct. And the business stuff is just like playing in the high register. The first time that you have an idea for something, it's not going to be a good one. The key to having good ideas is having lots of ideas. Right. So it's a muscle that you don't just decide, okay, you can't just like in-app purchase available for high register, and then suddenly you can play beadlo. It'd be nice. I'd buy it. But yeah, I mean, it's like it's the same stuff.
I've got a beadlo mouthpiece to sell you, by the way.
Oh, it's perfect. Yeah.
It's great, but it's tuned to a high G sharp, not a high A flat. I don't know if that works.
A flat does sound higher. That's what I call it. Well, so Dennis, you referenced it earlier, the tragic story about our good friend Jens Lindemann and the jaw problems that he's been having for quite some time at this point. And I was wondering if you could offer up some advice for him.
Well, I've heard a lot of the different pieces of advice ranging from, try this mouthpiece to that mouthpiece, which I always think is good advice. I think whenever something's wrong in playing, you should automatically suggest a different mouthpiece, because that's inevitably going to be that which wrecks it. But in terms of Yindemann's, I mean, it's a tragic situation.
Yindemann. You just called him Yindemann. That's awesome. That's great.
Giving you guys a new name
for
him.
Slam right there.
Terms of Yindemann. He's like, it's like Yanni, but different. Yindemann.
Yindemann.
He needs to grow his hair out.
Awesome.
I think it's not even a piece of advice. It's just a question directly to Jens. And the question is, have you ever really thought about the terms give up?
Nice.
That's, I think you just should consider this.
Yindemann is a Latin word for meaning you should give up. Yindemann. There you go. Somebody buy us the URL yindemann.com and forward it to pedalnotemedia.com, please. Thank you in advance.
So the cool thing is that by the time this airs, you will have been in office for a couple of months. So this might be used at your hearing.
Yeah.
Evidence.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I get that.
There you go.
Many of them knew what they were getting in for, so at any rate.
Well, it would have been nicer to talk to your wife, because we do like her more than you, but Kim is not available.
I'm appreciative of that fact. Yeah, she's in Europe right now. So.
Wow. What's she doing in Europe?
Our youngest daughter has been studying abroad in Scotland and is almost done, and Kim's been over there for 2 weeks gallivanting around.
Wow.
Going all over the place. They're in Venice today.
There was a night in Glasgow with Boston Brass that that was a night.
That was a night.
That was a night.
And that's where Jesse's been studying, was in Glasgow.
There you go. Well, it's a great town. I'm part Scottish. It's a little, like, Glasgow's a little rough around the edges. It's hard to stick out in a town like that, and we managed.
In the 7 years I was in, there were kind of 3 to 5 nights that were that was one of them.
That was one of them.
Wow.
That left a mark.
7 years you'll never get back, Lance.
I know. Neither will they.
Yeah. All right. Now that Lance and I are reminiscing about Glasgow, I think that does it. Am I forgetting anything there, LaDuke?
No, Dennis. Next time, please wear a shirt.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what. I'll even wear pants.
Fortunately, the camera didn't go that.
Yeah. There's no zoom. All right. So as we
Get it?
on
You know, get it?
on that note, we got all this highbrow talk about where music schools are headed,
Curriculum.
yeah, and then we
Park jokes.
end with some toilet humor. So that's how we roll here at the Brass
Made us
Junkies.
what we are today.
Yes.
I'm convinced we were at a tuba conference somehow.
Yeah, pretty much. So, all right, Dennis, thank you so much for your time and your energy and your efforts and your articulateness.
How about that?
Oh, who knew?
Who?
You're Yindeman.
What?
You're Yindeman. Yindeman.com. All right. And that will do it for another episode of The Brass Junkies. You've been listening to The Brass Junkies on the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network. If you would like to help support the podcast in order to make more episodes like this one possible, please visit pedalnotemedia.com/donate for more details. Also, be sure to check out our latest recording, The Brass Recording Project, at brassrecordingproject.com. The Brass Junkies is produced by Austin Boyer and Buddy Deschler of the Fredericksburg Brass Institute. Executive producers are Andrew Hitz and Lance LaDuke. This has been a presentation of the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network.